Let's move on to the next one. This is Brian Pagano, who at first refused to be questioned, claiming his Fifth Amendment rights under oath, which he's certainly entitled to do. But then it was my understanding, before he disappeared off the radar, at least for me, that he'd been granted immunity. So that anything he said, now I don't know who granted the immunity. Was it a congressional committee? Was it the FBI?
Was the Justice Department.
Justice Department. Okay, well that's quite a big difference from a congressional committee granting him immunity. What has happened to him? You mentioned the possibility that Clinton conspired with Pagano, if I'm pronouncing his name right, to keep her use of the private server a secret.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Pagliano or Pagliano, but here's the short version of what's happening with him is that he set up the server and he was working for Clinton going way back. He was working for her on her 2008 presidential campaign doing computer work for her. And so then in 2009, when she became Secretary of State, he got a job at the State Department, also working under her as sort of her IT person, her computer tech. And when he got that job, I think this is really underappreciated fact. When he got that job, he had to sign a form that asked him, "Do you have any outside jobs?" And he said no. And he has to fill out that form every year. So for 4 years, he said no. But it turned out that he was running Clinton's private email server as a part-time job on top of doing his State Department work. So he actually lied on that form 4 times. And the penalty for lying on that form, turns out, is 5 years in prison maximum. So this is why I think that he has made an immunity deal with the Justice Department, because they probably came to him and said, which would you rather do, 5 years in prison for this open and shut lying on this form, or are you going to tell us what you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this then, and forgive my ignorance, but what is the difference as far as the Justice Department is concerned regarding what you just said? What is the difference between Pagliano working for the State Department under Clinton and working for Clinton, setting up an email server? Where's the distinction there?
Well, they want to have, they want to make sure that there's no conflict of interest, that you wouldn't be working at the State Department and holding some other job where you might potentially have some other motive that could influence your State Department work, right? Mm-hmm. So, everybody has to say if they have an outside job, and they only give very special exceptions to allow that. Like Huma Abedin actually got a special exemption, but only maximum of 6 months was the rule. So for him to do this for all 4 years, that was clearly illegal, and he knew it, and I'm sure Clinton knew it. And she was doing this private server privately. It was being run from her house, and just because she's Secretary of State, if you do some job for her, like mowing her lawn or whatever, that is not officially government work. This was a private contract because she was running the whole thing basically off the books in order to make sure that nobody, or at least very few people within the State Department, knew that she was running a private server. For instance, had he signed this form and said, "I'm running a private server for Clinton as a part-time job," then of course other people would have looked at that form, and within very short time it would have become known within the State Department. Mm-hmm. You could see there was a motive there, and the question is, would Clinton have told him to lie on that form or otherwise be quiet about his private server work?
Well, then you're into conspiracy and obstruction.
Yeah. Right. So this is like, there's 6 reasons. That's a pretty big reason, but it's kind of a black box, this one, because we don't know what was going on. As you mentioned earlier, I heard you mentioning the story about how it's recently come out that all of Pagliano's emails have not shown up, so we don't know what's in there. But when you look at what I'm just telling you, and then you find out that all those emails are missing, it starts to make you go, what's going on here? A lot of suspicious things. But again, we don't know it. but the FBI knows more. There was a story that came out that said, uh, so they said that he was, quote, a devastating witness, unquote. And you don't typically make a deal like this unless you've got a small fish and you're going
Right.
after the big fish.
Right.
And
Right.
who's the big fish in this case? He was working directly for Hillary Clinton. So they're basically turning down open and shut. We can get this guy's 5 years in prison in the hopes of trying to get something on Clinton. So I think that this is actually, I mean, we'll keep going down the list, but this is actually much more serious than most people realize.
All right. Well, let me ask you. I've been fascinated by the Sidney Blumenthal relationship with the Clintons, and especially with Hillary Clinton, for a number of years. What is the Blumenthal intelligence pipeline, as you put it in this email to me, and the possibility of Clinton sending classified information to him? Now, didn't he at one time work in the government? Wasn't he? He worked for Clinton, Bill Clinton, during his administration, didn't he?
Right. Blumenthal is a man who wears many hats. So he had a security clearance, and he did work in the White House back in the Bill Clinton days. But then when he got out, he was a private citizen again, never had a security clearance. And so he was a close friend of the Clintons, and he was also a news reporter. And when Clinton won or didn't win, was appointed to be Secretary of State, she really, really wanted him to work under her as a Secretary of State official.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a big dust-up between her and Obama over this because Blumenthal had said a lot of really nasty things
About Obama,
about
right?
Obama.
Mm-hmm.
He was sort of leading a whispering campaign through emails to lots of journalists. So he said, no way, you're not, like over my dead body. But then it seems that Clinton basically ignored that and more or less treated him like a State Department employee. She gave him a job at the Clinton Foundation where he was being paid $120,000 a year and seemingly doing no charity work there whatsoever. And then he would send her emails all the time. He sent her about one email every other day, and not just your normal emails. These would be long emails that contained detailed intelligence reports. And this is where it gets kind of strange.
Well, no, wait. From Blumenthal to Clinton, intelligence reports?
Right.
How
He's just a private citizen with no security clearance. So where is he getting his information
That
from?
was the next question. Where is he getting classified information?
So it turns out maybe some of these are just, he met someone at dinner or whatever, or sometimes personal speculation, but it seems that most of them actually were coming from other government agencies, especially the CIA and the NSA. And he had a pal named Tyler Drummuller, I believe was his name, something to that effect, and he was an ex-CIA official, but he retired in 2005. And he was sending Blumenthal all kinds of information. So then the question is, where did he get his information from? And it seems like he still had contacts with people in the intelligence community who were active, and they would send him stuff. In one case, we found, looking at these emails, there was actually an email that Blumenthal sent to Clinton that had information from the NSA about a meeting of rebel generals in Sudan that took place mere hours earlier. So someone was getting hot off the press stuff right from the source that was very highly classified, and yet this is very dodgy because he was not a State Department employee. He didn't have any security clearance. So he shouldn't have been getting this information. As soon as Clinton got any information like this from someone like him who doesn't have a clearance, it was her duty. She had signed an oath when she came into office saying, you have to secure classified information. So she should have immediately contacted security people and said, we have to flag this and we have to track down where the source comes from and quiet it up, because we can't be having these kinds of leaks. And yet for 4 years he sent her an email like this pretty much every other day, and then there, not very often, but sometimes Clinton would then send him information that was also classified. And that's really bad because, when people look at this and they say, oh, there's all this classified information in these emails, most of the time it was between people who worked in government who had some kind of security clearance. So the government, it usually is more lenient in that case. It's different than if you're, handing that over to someone in Russia or something like that.
Right.
But with Sid Blumenthal, he had no security clearance. Clinton knew he had no security clearance, and yet she would tell him things in emails that you're just not supposed to tell someone who's a private citizen.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think the name you were looking for is Drumheller.
Drumheller, yeah.
And once again, he worked for Blumenthal.
Well, they had a kind of a collaboration, and they actually, at one point, in 2011, when the Libyan civil war started happening, they and a couple other people got together and created a kind of a private mercenary company that was designed to help the Libyan rebels with medical supplies and training and weapons and so forth. So this adds like a whole other wrinkle. I mean, this is a really complicated story, but you can see now that Blumenthal would have a financial motive in some of what he's doing.
Yikes.
And Blumenthal may have had financial motive. I found one email that had Drumheller writing to the head of the government of Libya, basically offering his services as an intelligence source to that person, which now you're starting to look at possible treason charges. But unfortunately, he died late last year, apparently of pancreatic cancer, so we may never get to the bottom of that. But something very fishy was going on with this. I call it intelligence pipeline, and other people have called it something like that, intelligence network or whatever, that Blumenthal was passing all this information on to Clinton, and then Clinton would often turn around and forward that to other people in the government, including sometimes to the White House, and yet she would not say it came from Blumenthal because she knew that Blumenthal was so hated in the White House. So she'd just say, here's some intelligence I got. So now you're getting this intelligence that could be dubious sometimes or could have a personal motive behind it. There's never any point where it's being properly vetted by people who actually could say this is real or this is bogus, right? So this is a whole other problem that Clinton has.
Well, let me, if I may, how would you describe from the work you've done, the research you've done, how would you describe Hillary Clinton's role in this? By that I mean, was she an active, and I'm not going to use this term in the legal sense, but was she an active co-conspirator with all this information, passing it, receiving it, sending it, or was she, and I don't want to use this word too definitively either, was she innocent of what was going on? Do you understand what I'm saying there?
I do, and she was definitely not innocent. We have one email actually that's come out where Blumenthal mentions in passing that this particular email, he got this information from someone who was active inside the CIA. So she knew that this information was coming to her in a way that definitely should never be coming to her.